Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Battle Cry, the only show on Indian television that gets you up close with Indian weapons, Indian war fighters, and how this country defends itself. This latest episode of Battle Cry puts the spotlight on an unfortunate accident involving the Indian Navy. Frontline Indian Navy warship catches fire and sinks at its berth. Peacetime sinking haunts the Navy. But what sank INS Brahmaputra? Can this warship be rescued? Who is to blame for this disaster? Will INS Brahmaputra sail again? This week on Battle Cry. INS Brahmaputra is a frontline warship of the Indian Navy. In active service, it was in the Mumbai Naval Dockyard for a refit, a kind of upgrade that would basically extend its life. The ship is 25 years old, but what happened in its home berth in the Naval Dockyard is something that's giving the Navy nightmares. Take a look. A beloved frontline warship of the Indian Navy. A quarter-century of service, sailing the high seas, armed to the teeth, in defense of the nation. And ever ready to execute India's maritime missions. But this is what INS Brahmaputra looks like now. The guided missile frigate has collapsed on its side and partially sunk at its berth in the Mumbai Naval Dockyard. The ship was in Mumbai for a refit when a fire broke out on board on July the 22nd, captured in these images at night. Thankfully, the ship had no weapons on board and very little fuel, or else the fire could have resulted in a full-fledged inferno. But owing to the huge amounts of water pumped onto the ship to contain the fire, the 4,000-ton frigate began to lean towards the dock, crashed into it, and then partially sank into the sea at its own berth. Indian Navy Chief Admiral Dinesh Tripathi dashed to Mumbai a couple of days after to personally inspect the sunk warship and to take stock of next steps under the Western Fleet. A board of inquiry has begun and is being led by a Rear Admiral rank officer equivalent to a Major General in the Army. The Brahmaputra's dockyard mishap isn't the first time a ship has collapsed at the Mumbai Naval Dockyard. 6 years ago, INS Brahmaputra's sister ship, INS Betwa, slipped off its docking blocks and fell onto its side. It took the Navy a huge amount of money and time to resurrect the warship and get her back into active fleet service. But another ship didn't enjoy the same happy ending. In 2011, the frigate INS Vindhyagiri, which had crawled back to the Mumbai Naval Dockyard after a devastating collision with a merchant ship, promptly sank at its berth. And while the Indian Navy decided to commit huge funds to raise her and repair her, it was finally decided that she wasn't fit for a return to service and was therefore decommissioned. One thing's for sure, the Brahmaputra will be raised, salvaged, and put back on her feet. The question that remains is, will the Navy deem her fit for a full repair and return to active service? Or is this the end of an elegant warship, fondly called the Raging Rhino? For now, the Indian Navy is wasting no time and is focused on bringing her back up. And that alone will take weeks, if not months. And joining me to discuss what happened to the INS Brahmaputra, what the implications are and what the challenges ahead for the Indian Navy are, Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, former Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Naval Command. Welcome, sir. Commodore Anil Jaisingh is a veteran submariner and part of the National Maritime Foundation. Thank you for being with us, Commodore. And Captain DK Sharma, former spokesperson of the Indian Navy. He's currently associated with Bharat Shakti. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you once again for your time and for being with me here on Battle Cry. Admiral Sinha, I'd like to start with you, sir. Your opening assessment of this accident. You know, a lot of things have been said in the media, but as a Navy man, how big an accident is this in your view, sir?
Well, thank you, Shiv, for getting me on your program. As you mentioned in the beginning that it was an unfortunate accident. Well, all accidents are unfortunate, but this is rather more unfortunate because it has happened alongside. Having said that, accidents, loss of life, these are absolutely unforgiving. Obviously, there has been some error, there has been some slip somewhere in the procedures. The ships, while they're in refit, they're very prone to fire because a lot of dockyard work goes on where they use the welding machine, they play with fire. And firefighting is the most important aspect of any refit ship.
Yes.
I've got two of my colleagues here, they will also tell you the same thing. And obviously the fire was in such a place that it could not be controlled, and the external help of the firefighters was taken. And at the moment, very difficult to say what all led to the ship tilting to one side. But as a very wild guess, though the Board of Investigation is going on, Board of Inquiry, I'm sure they will find out, they will get to the root. But there are two points. One is that, when the ships are in refit, most of the weights, the heavy weights are removed from the ship.
Yes.
Including the ammunition, the fuel, and what have you, your personal baggage, etc., etc. So the ship's stability, sometimes the ship's stability is a little bit very close to being outside the limit. So I hope that doesn't happen. That's number one. If that happens, then the water which has been pumped on the ship to fight the fire, it is quite possible that it appears that the fire was on the left side.
Yeah.
And the water pumping has been done quite a lot from outside. If the water does not get out of the ship immediately, then you've got that extra weight, and which can lead to a bit of instability and tilting of the ship to one side. So rather unfortunate, and it's an operational ship. It was an operational ship. It was the lead ship of Brahmaputra class, and it's really, really very sad to see a ship suffer this kind of accident.
Very, very sad. Commodore Jaisingh, your assessment, sir, of what you think may have happened. Fires on warships are not uncommon at all. We are aware of the famous fire triangle on ships, fuel, oxygen and heat, always there in abundance on warships. This was a ship in its home berth, in its dockyard. Very unfortunate to see those images of the ship, half sunk. Could this not have been avoided, sir? How do you assess it?
Well, any accident when seen in hindsight could have been avoided. There is no doubt about that. But an accident is an accident. It has happened. For whatever the reasons, those reasons will come out sooner rather than later once the inquiry is completed. But of loss, it's a major event. It should not have happened. But now that it has happened, one of the things that can cause a fire to spread, there are many factors. Like Admiral, we really don't know where the fire started, what led it to spread. Otherwise, when a ship is in refit, there's lots of welding work going on all over the ship with dockyard workers. And wherever there's welding work going on, there's always a sailor posted there with firefighting equipment who's meant to prevent something like this from happening. So obviously that, I'm sure they were not negligent about putting that, because ships are very particular about ensuring, we call them a hot work sentry, who's positioned there wherever hot work is happening. So obviously either it kind of went out of control and was beyond the capacity of that person to sort of douse it.
Yes.
Or something else caused the fire which made it spread rapidly. In refit, fire should not spread so rapidly actually, because there's no fuel on board, there's no ammunition on board. It's basically a metal structure. There could be a little bit of oil and all somewhere on the decks, if there is. But it almost took a whole night to put out the fire, which must have been tremendous. And I think the reason for it having sort of toppled to one side is, I guess, the same reason, that in fighting the fire, so much water was pumped into the ship that it became unstable.
Yeah.
You know, when the center of gravity and the center of buoyancy cross each other, the ship becomes unstable.
Right.
And it sort of tilted to one side. Because, ships operate in very choppy seas.
Absolutely.
Sea stage 7, they're rolling and pitching 30 degrees, rolling and 15 to 20 pitching. And they don't capsize in that. So a ship alongside in absolutely calm water, tilting to one side, obviously has some other reason than just there's no reason to believe the ship was unstable. Obviously, instability is being caused by something, perhaps the excess water.
Correct.
Which has tilted it over to one side. It's a very unfortunate accident. Accidents should not happen, but accidents do happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it's called an accident. And I hope they can salvage the ship, recover it, learn the right lessons from it.
Yeah.
And, then it will have sort of... that.
I'm going to get into the salvage a bit in my second round of questions. Before I ask that question, Captain DK Sharma, not the first time something like this has happened, but very unfortunate to see that the ship actually began listing. Initially, it was understood that the fire had been brought under control. Later, the Navy had to update its statement and say the ship has actually listed and is resting to one side. How big is this in your view?
Well, it is a very, very unfortunate incident which has unfolded in the Mumbai Dockyard when INS Brahmaputra was in refit and undergoing periodic maintenance. Now, what has gone wrong? Who is at fault? What all were the circumstances and what all contributed towards, causing this kind of a disaster is yet to be seen. And we know that a board of inquiry has been ordered.
Yes.
And a 2-star is going to head it. And they will certainly find out what is the root cause of it and why it has happened. You see, it is disastrous to have a loss of a ship.
Absolutely.
In peacetime. But then I want to bring out a few things. That our fleet is a little old. It is time now the powers that be look into replacing our old ships. If you see, majority of our ships are of the vintage of 90, early 2000.
Yeah, this ship was 25 years old.
Service of 30 years, 20 years. And that is why they go in for extensive refits and maintenance. But should we have a policy of replacing the ships, which means that let's have 2-3 lines of productions which keep on infusing new ships and submarines so that the technology is modern, the ships are new, less of maintenance is required. All this will, augur very well for the Navy.
Yeah.
Yes, when the country, how much can the country afford? That becomes the moot point. But now the Indian economy is booming. We can afford all this. So it is a point to be, considered by the powers, by the government, by the MOD that India now needs new ships, new production lines, and we need to have a modern fleet rather than an older fleet, which is being used by doing extensive maintenance regularly. And that is where the problem starts.
Captain Sharma, he makes a very evocative point. And, an aging fleet will also contribute to the possibility of more accidents of this kind happening because more modern ships will have more safety features on board. Admiral Sinha, we've got graphics on our screen talking about the past mishaps, and there have been, some in the Indian Navy. But speaking specifically of the Brahmaputra, from what we can see and what we know so far, sir, do you think she can be salvaged? Do you think she can return to active service?
I'm quite confident, Shiv, that she can be salvaged because the way she is tilted, what I see the pictures, it can be. It will be a little bit of effort, straightening it and sort of reducing the weight before straightening, securing it in the present position so that it doesn't go down further. So that is the first thing to be done. And thereafter, use the mechanical ways to lift her up to a even keel position.
Yeah.
And thereafter, gradually start cleaning the compartments and see that the ship is stable and it is floating on her own. So it will go back to the as they say, first it is float, move and fight. So we'll have to go back in those steps. First, she should be able to float, which I am quite confident she will. It will require a fair amount of repair because don't forget that she has suffered a major fire which could not be controlled.
Correct.
And there's so many reasons for it. So I think that it can be salvaged. It may be a little time taking, but I think 5 to 6 months I will give. Our dockyards are very capable, and they should be able to get her out, get her moving in 5 to 6 months' time.
Okay, very interesting. Commodore Jai Singh, do you concur with that she can be salvaged and hopefully will return to service? We have the example of the INS Betwa, which was successfully salvaged and returned to service and is in fact in current active service. You had the Vindhyagiri before that, which had suffered a collision actually and then sank at harbour. She was salvaged, but then it was decided that she would be decommissioned. Of course, very, very different circumstances, but how do you see Brahmaputra? Do you see her going back to service?
Yeah, I would agree with Admiral Sinha. I think the ship is definitely salvageable and being brought back into active service. It just tilted over. It hasn't sort of sunk. It hasn't fallen over and damaged itself very badly. It just listed to port side, its port side, and is resting against the jetty. So I'm sure it can be straightened out. It won't be easy, of course, because the weights have to be readjusted and all. It has to be made stable. But I'm quite confident the ship will be salvaged. It's important to salvage it if it is, cost effective and not something that is well beyond an acceptable cost.
Yeah.
Because it's about other issues. It's about morale. It's about things like that. Okay, an accident happened, but we brought her back. So I think it's important that the ship is salvaged, brought back into active service to prove that these things can happen, but that does not sort of break the back of the Navy, so to speak. It's just it's all part of a day's work. Well, something happened, unfortunate.
Yes.
But we've recovered from it and we shall continue doing what we're doing. And you will agree with me.
Yes.
The Navy has been doing a stellar job over the last 3 months. It's unfortunate that this has happened.
There is no doubt about the fact that the Navy is one of the most professional maritime forces in the world, and there is, every piece of support that we also see for the Navy in terms of navigating this particular accident, in terms of bringing the ship out and assessing through various criteria whether it makes economic sense to keep her in service or to decommission her. Morale also a very, very important point that most of us miss when we talk about such things. Remember, it's human officers and sailors who operate these ships. So for a moment, think about what's going on in their minds as well. Captain Sharma, economics, combat effectiveness, etc., are all considerations that will be in front of the Navy, when it needs to take that decision about returning, salvaging and returning the Brahmaputra to service. Tell us your view on that, the considerations.
Well, it is. There is no doubt about it in my mind, and also the Chief of the Naval Staff, when he visited 2-3 days back to the Naval Dockyard, Mumbai, he has given very clear instructions that as soon as possible, please put all the might, make the ship upright, back to sea. So a salvage will take some time and it will cost us some amount of money, but I can assure you the ship will be up sooner than later, and she will be put to sea. So salvage, though it is a very, very tasking kind of a, exercise, but I'm very sure, and this we have done in 2016 also, when in Mumbai dock, in a dry dock, same kind of a ship had toppled when she was being, floated after her maintenance or after her underwater package was done, the repair was done. But unfortunately, that day also something went wrong in the stability, and that ship also keeled over. But this will be salvaged.
And I sincerely hope that the words of all three of the officers we've had on our episode today ring true. We would love nothing more than to see INS Brahmaputra, back upright and back out to sea, back in active service. Like we can all agree, it's going to take some money. This is definitely an accident. The questions must be asked. The board of inquiry will be gone through. And like many veterans have been reminding me since our coverage started, the Navy does not spare anyone. Accountability is always fixed. Whether heads will roll or not is a separate issue. But if there were any lapses, if there were any errors, if there were any standard operating procedures which were not obeyed, then accountability will be fixed. This is, after all, a national asset. We pray and hope that the crew of Brahmaputra will sail in her on the high seas once again. Admiral Sinha, Commodore Jai Singh and Captain Sharma, thank you as always for your time and for being with me and lending your wisdom on a sensitive issue here, as always, on Battle Cry. Thank you. And before we end this episode, I did want to mention the young sailor who lost his life in the accident of the INS Brahmaputra. Leading seaman Sitendra Singh, that's him in the picture, leaves behind a grieving family and colleagues, the crew of the INS Brahmaputra. We pay tribute to this young sailor who lost his life trying to escape when the ship was collapsing in its home berth. In his memory, we hope and pray that the INS Brahmaputra returns to active service.